911, what's your emergency?
I'm shot, help me. I'm shot, help me, please. Jesus, help me, I'm shot.
Okay, what's the address of the emergency, ma'am? What's the address of your emergency?
I'm shot, help me, please.
What's your address?
What's your address, ma'am?
Shot me, help me, please. He shot me.
Where?
Oh, what the? Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Ma'am, hello, ma'am. Ma'am, hello. Hello.
Right now, come out here and help me kill this bitch. Now!
She made it out of the bedroom. She made it past the front door. She made it all the way down the street and onto a neighbor's porch. Barefoot, bleeding, pounding on a stranger's door at nearly midnight. Let that picture sit in your mind for a second. This woman had just been shot with a 12-gauge shotgun at close range inside her own bedroom. She had gotten up off that floor. She had pushed herself through the pain, through the smoke, through the dark, and she ran. Because that is what a mother does. She does not stay down when her children are still inside. But the man who pulled that trigger was not done. He followed her out of the house. He followed her down the street. He followed her all the way to that neighbor's porch. And back inside the house she had just escaped. 2 children were still there. One of them was 9 years old, had cerebral palsy, and could not get out of bed on her own. The other was 8 years old, and by the time police arrived on that street, he would walk out of a fire, alone. After being stabbed multiple times and set alight by the one man on earth who was supposed to love him most. This is not a horror story someone made up. This happened. On the night of March 18, 2018, in Riverview, Florida, on a street called Baroness Avenue, a family was torn apart in one of the most savage and calculated ways imaginable. And what followed, the investigation, the trial, the courtroom, the moment a child looked his father in the eye on a witness stand, would become one of the most talked about true crime cases in Florida history. Welcome to Cases Decoded. And tonight we are going all the way in. But before we do, I want to know who is here with me right now. Drop a comment below and tell me what city and country you are watching from. And tell me what time it is over there right now as you are watching this. I read every single comment. It helps this channel grow and it helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. If you are new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss what we drop next. This community is built on real stories told with the full truth. Every single time. Now, let us go to Baroness Avenue. It is a Sunday night in the middle of March. The year is 2018. Riverview, Florida sits just southeast of Tampa. It is the kind of suburb where nothing dramatic ever happens. People mow their lawns on Saturday mornings. Kids ride bikes in the street. Neighbors wave at each other from their driveways. It is the kind of place that feels safe by design. Quiet streets, warm air, houses close enough together that you feel like someone is always nearby if you need them. Most people on Baroness Avenue are already asleep by the time this story begins. The weekend is winding down. Work starts again in the morning. Everything feels like a normal Sunday night. But inside one house on that street, a family of 4 is living under a roof that has been hiding something very dark. Kenyatta Baron is 33 years old. She is a mother first and everything else second. Everyone who knew her describes a woman who loved deeply and gave everything she had to the people in her life. She had been in a relationship with Ronnie O'Neal the Third for years. They had 2 children together. Ronnie O'Neal the Third is 38 years old. On paper, he is a father, a partner, a man living in a family home in a quiet neighborhood. But behind that picture, there is a pattern of control, of escalating tension, of behavior that had already drawn the attention of law enforcement. At the time of the events of that night, there is an active case being built against him. Their daughter is Ronnie. She is 9 years old. She was born with cerebral palsy. She cannot walk on her own. She cannot communicate the way most children her age can. She is entirely and completely dependent on the adults in that house to look after her, protect her, and keep her safe. That is the most important thing I need you to understand about Ronnie before we go any further. And their son, Ronnie the Fourth. He is 8 years old. He is just a little boy. He should have nothing more serious on his mind than whatever is happening at school tomorrow. At 11:43 in the evening, a 911 dispatcher receives a call. There is no calm voice on the other end of that line. There is no clear address given. There is no controlled breathing and careful description of an emergency. What comes through that call is immediate and unmistakable. It is screaming. Kenyatta Baron is on that line. And she is not just asking for help. She is begging for her life. She is crying. She is terrified. And in the middle of all of that, she manages to say something that tells you everything about what kind of woman she is. "I'm so sorry, Ronnie," she cries. Even in the worst moment of her life, she is apologizing. Even while she is the one in danger, some part of her is still trying to hold things together. Those are among the last words Kenyatta Baron will ever speak. Then the dispatcher hears something that no one who has ever worked that job ever fully gets past. A shotgun blast. 12 gauge. 1 round. Fired at close range inside a bedroom. The screaming does not stop. In the background behind it, a man's voice rises above the chaos. Deep, rhythmic, controlled. Not the voice of someone panicking. Not the voice of someone who has just done something terrible and is falling apart. This is the voice of someone who sounds detached from everything happening around him. Shouting the same phrase over and over with a strange kind of rhythm, like he is performing rather than reacting. The dispatcher tries to get an address, tries to ask questions, tries to make contact. But the line is telling its own story, and that story is enough. Police are already moving toward Baroness Avenue. Kenyatta Baron had taken a shotgun round inside her own bedroom, and she got up. I want you to really think about that for a moment, because it would have been the easiest and most natural thing in the world to stay down, to give in to the shock and the pain and the blood loss. But Kenyatta did not do that. She pushed herself off that floor, and she moved toward the only thing her mind was locked onto. Her children. She ran. Not toward the kitchen. Not toward the back of the house. She ran toward the front door, toward the street, toward the lights and the neighbors and anything that felt like it could stop what was happening to her. Her thinking, even in that moment, was survival, because if she survived, her children had a chance. She made it to a neighbor's porch just down the street. She collapsed against the door. She started pounding on it. She was losing blood fast and she was running out of time, and some part of her still believed that if she could just get someone to open that door, it would be over. Inside that neighbor's house, someone heard the sound and looked out into the night. What they saw is the kind of thing that changes a person forever. Kenyatta on the ground, covered in blood, reaching for the door. And behind her, moving out of the dark, was a large man. Ronnie O'Neal the Third had followed her. He did not have the shotgun in his hands anymore. He had something else. Investigators would later identify it as a hatchet, a short, heavy-bladed tool that in the hands of a man his size and in the state of mind he was clearly in, was capable of enormous damage. The neighbor watched what happened next. There was no hesitation. There was no pause. There was no moment where it looked like he might stop. This was not blind rage that had suddenly taken over a man. This was deliberate. This was focused. This was a man who had made up his mind about what the night was going to end with, and nothing was going to change that. Kenyatta Baron died on that porch. She was 33 years old. She was a mother trying to get to safety so she could fight for her kids. She made it as far as any human being in her position possibly could have. She gave every last thing she had. And on Baroness Avenue, behind her, the house she had just run from was beginning to glow orange. While Kenyatta was fighting for her life outside, 2 children were still inside that burning house. Ronnie was in her bedroom. She could not get out of bed by herself. She could not walk to the door. She could not shout loud enough for anyone to hear her from the street. She was 9 years old and she was entirely at the mercy of whatever was happening around her, with no ability whatsoever to change any of it. Her father had entered her room before he went after Kenyatta. He had the hatchet. When the medical examiner completed the autopsy, the findings were devastating and clear. Ronnie did not die from the fire that would later consume that house. She did not die from smoke inhalation. Her father had struck her multiple times with the hatchet, with a level of force that the forensic team described as extreme. She was 9 years old. She had cerebral palsy. She never had a single second to protect herself. I want to say her name again so it does not get lost in the facts. Ronnie, 9 years old. Her brother, Ronnie the Fourth, 8 years old, had been found elsewhere in the house. He had been stabbed multiple times. He had been covered in gasoline. His father had set fire to the master bedroom, pouring accelerant across the floors and the walls before striking a match, and then he had left. He left with the intent of burning away the evidence of everything he had done that night. He left with the intent of destroying the memories. He left with the intent of making sure there were no witnesses. He left his children in a burning house. When police cruisers turned onto Baroness Avenue, the first thing they registered was not a crime scene. It was fire. The windows of the house were radiating orange light. Black smoke was pushing up through the roof line. The heat inside had already reached the point where it was warping and melting everything it touched. And walking out through the front door of that house, hands raised, completely calm, was Ronnie O'Neal the Third. He did not look frightened. He did not look like a man who had just lost his partner and his children. He looked like a man who was exactly where he had planned to be. Officers hit the ground with him and got the cuffs on. And then one of the responding officers looked past him, past the smoke and the heat and the chaos of the scene, and noticed something moving. A shape, small, slow. A boy. Ronnie the Fourth walked out of that fire on his own 2 feet. He was 8 years old. He had been stabbed. He had been set alight. His clothes were charred. His skin was burned. He was holding his stomach with both hands as he walked. An officer ran to him and crouched down to meet his eyes. And the boy said 5 words. "My daddy killed my mommy." 5 words. In that moment, every lie that Ronnie O'Neal the Third had already begun constructing, that Kenyatta was the aggressor, that he had only been defending himself, that he was the victim in all of this, every single piece of that false story fell apart before it ever had a real chance to stand. The boy was rushed to a waiting helicopter. Firefighters pushed into the structure to look for any other survivors. They moved through the living room, through the hallway, fighting against the heat and the collapsing ceiling. And in the back bedroom they found Ronnie. She had never moved. If you are still with me, and I know you are, please hit that like button right now. It is one tap and it helps this video reach more people. The more people who see this, the more people who remember these names. That matters. Now let us keep going. Fire destroys evidence. That is a simple and practical truth. And Ronnie O'Neal the Third knew that when he lit that match. He was counting on it. But fire is not a perfect eraser. Investigators who are trained in forensic fire analysis understand exactly how a fire moves through a structure, exactly what it destroys and in what order, and exactly what it leaves behind even when it tries to take everything with it. The team that moved into Baroness Avenue after the flames were brought under control began reading the scene piece by piece. A scene that O'Neal had been counting on to disappear. It did not. In the master bedroom, they recovered a 12-gauge shotgun with 1 spent shell still in the chamber and additional shells scattered across the floor. The pore pattern of the accelerant was clear and readable. Someone had moved through that room in a deliberate path, spreading fuel before lighting it. This was not an accident. This was not a gas leak or a candle. This was arson, and the evidence of it was preserved in exactly the way arson investigators are trained to find. Footwear impressions in the dust and debris on the floor told a story of movement. A single set of prints tracking from the bedroom through the house and toward the front. 1 set, not 2. 1 person moving with purpose through that space. The forensic work on the neighbor's porch confirmed what the neighbor had witnessed. The blood evidence there was consistent with an attack involving a bladed or heavy weapon used with significant force at close range. But the most important piece of evidence that night did not come from inside the house or on that porch. Came from a phone call. While Kenyatta's 911 call had captured terror in its rawest form. Screaming, A gunshot. A woman pleading for her life. Ronnie O'Neal made his own 911 call that same night. Not to turn himself in. Not to ask for medical help for his children. He called to set up his cover story. He told the dispatcher that Kenyatta had come after him. That he had only been acting in self-defense. That he was the one who needed protection. He was calm, measured, and already working on the narrative he planned to sell. He was on the phone building a false story while the house behind him burned with both of his children still inside it.
911, what is your emergency?
Hey, I just been attacked by some fucking white demons inside, and she tried to fucking kill me, and
What's the
I just
address?
killed her stupid ass. Huh?
What's the address of the emergency? Try to attack you?
Yes, yes, yes. She did. She tried to kill me.
The DNA analysis from the scene tied him to every significant location. The fire investigation report confirmed deliberate arson. The autopsy results for both Kenyatta and Ron confirmed the cause and manner of death. Ronnie O'Neal the Third was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for Kenyatta Baron and one for Ron, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder for what he had done to his son, and 1 count of arson. And then he made the decision that would turn the upcoming trial into something the people of Florida had never quite seen before. He fired his attorneys. He was going to stand in that courtroom and represent himself. The trial began in 2021. 3 years had passed since the night of March 18th. 3 years of investigations, of legal proceedings, of a child growing up in the shadow of the worst night of his life. And from the very moment the trial started, Ronnie O'Neal the Third made it absolutely clear that he was not going to make anything easy for anyone in that room. He interrupted witnesses while they were giving testimony. He talked over the judge mid-sentence. He dismissed evidence with a wave of his hand like it was barely worth his attention. He referred to himself in the third person at various points, as though he was narrating his own story from the outside. He stood up and delivered what he called opening remarks that moved between legal arguments and something that looked more like a one-man show. He changed his outfit every single day of the trial, tactical gear one day, formal clothes the next, casual wear the day after that, cycling through looks like a man who was trying to project a new version of himself to whoever was watching. Judge Michelle Cisco had spent years on the bench. She had seen difficult defendants before. She had managed challenging courtrooms before. But even she had to stop proceedings repeatedly just to restore basic order. "You are not going to raise your voice in this courtroom again," she told him at one point, direct and firm. "I will have you removed."
Mr. O'Neal,
All right.
listen, stop,
All right.
listen to me.
I'm not
going to raise your voice again.
I'm not going to raise my voice again. I'm not.
I will have you removed from this courtroom. I can sentence you without you being present.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't conduct
I
yourself.
understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
O'Neal's argument was the same one he had been building since that 911 call he made the night of March 18th. Kenyatta had come at him. He had acted in self-defense. The fire was being mischaracterized. His children had been caught in a terrible situation that was not the result of anything he had intended. He was a father. He was the one who had been wronged. For any of that to work, the jury would have to set aside the forensic evidence, the DNA results, the arson investigation, the recorded 911 calls, and the direct eyewitness testimony of the neighbor who had stood at their window and watched what happened on that porch. And they would have to set aside one more person. Someone who was now 11 years old. Someone who had walked out of a burning house at 8 years old after surviving things that would break most adults. Someone who had spent 3 years carrying the truth about that night inside him, waiting for his moment to speak it out loud. The prosecution called Ronnie the Fourth to the stand. The courtroom changed when he walked in. It was not the normal shift in energy that happens when witnesses take the stand. It was something heavier. Something that made even the people who had been covering this trial for months sit up straighter in their seats. Ronnie the Fourth walked into that courtroom wearing a small suit. He looked tiny sitting in the witness chair. He was 11 years old. He had the kind of stillness about him that you do not often see in children, the kind of stillness that only comes from having been through something that required you to grow up faster than any child should. On one side of that room, the jury, the gallery, the cameras, the press, the judge. On the other side, The man who had stabbed him, soaked him in gasoline, set the house on fire, and walked out the front door without looking back. His father. Because Ronnie O'Neal the Third had chosen to represent himself, Florida law gave him the legal right to cross-examine every witness the prosecution called, including his own son. And so he stood up. He walked toward the witness stand, and he said, in a voice that was suddenly softer than anything he had used in the courtroom up to that point, "It's good to see you, man." The boy looked at him. "Good to see you too," the boy replied. O'Neal launched into his questions. He tried to build doubt around what the boy had actually witnessed on the night of March 18th. He leaned into the darkness of the house that night, the smoke filling the rooms, the chaos of everything happening at once, trying to suggest to the jury that an 8-year-old in the middle of all of that could not possibly have had a clear enough view to know what he was seeing. "Did I hurt you that night?" O'Neal asked. His voice dropped lower. He was trying to sound gentle. He was trying to sound like a reasonable man asking a simple question. The boy did not blink. "Yes," Ronnie the Fourth said. "You stabbed me." O'Neal did not stop. He pressed on. "Did you actually see me stab you?" The boy did not hesitate. "I saw you with the knife," he said. Calm, clear, completely steady. Steadier than men twice his age and 4 times his size would be sitting 5 feet away from the person who tried to end their life. Steadier than anyone in that room had any right to expect from an 11-year-old boy. O'Neal continued the cross-examination. He started calling the boy son. He tried to establish some kind of warmth between them, some sense that they were on the same side, that they shared a history that the courtroom did not fully understand. He tried to act like this was just 2 people having a conversation rather than what it actually was. A man trying to undo the testimony of the child he had tried to murder. It did not work. Ronnie the Fourth told the jury about the gasoline. He told them what he had seen his father do. He told them what he had been told to do. He stuck to every single thing he knew to be true without flinching, without softening it, without giving O'Neal the smallest opening he was looking for. When he stepped down from that witness stand, everything in that courtroom had already shifted. The noise was gone. The theatrics were over. The jury had watched something they would not forget. An 11-year-old boy sitting 5 feet from the man who tried to kill him, looking him in the eye, and telling the truth with a steadiness that most grown adults would not be able to summon. And the man had lost. The closing arguments came and went. Ronnie O'Neal the Third stood before that jury one final time with every opportunity in the world to say something human, to apologize, to show grief for Ron Na, to acknowledge what he had put his son through. He used none of it that way. He told the jury the prosecution's case was built on lies. He told them he was a father who had been pushed past a breaking point by someone else. He stood there to the very end trying to be the victim. The prosecution did not need to match his volume or his drama. They pointed to the table, the hatchet, the forensic reports, the arson documentation. They played Kenyatta's 911 call one more time, so that the sound of her voice, the last recording of a woman who spent her final moments trying to save her children, was the last thing the jury carried into the deliberation room. "The evidence does not lie," the prosecutor said. "People do." The jury went in to deliberate. In a double murder trial with this level of evidence and this much complexity, deliberations often stretch across multiple days, sometimes longer. The Ronnie O'Neal jury returned in 4 hours. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Every single count. O'Neal did not flinch when the clerk read the verdicts. He did not bow his head. He did not close his eyes. He stood there with the expression of a man still waiting for a response he was never going to receive. Judge Michelle Cisco had given many sentences over the course of her career on the bench. She had looked into the faces of people who had done terrible things and handed down the punishment the law required. But when she looked at Ronnie O'Neal the Third at sentencing, she said something that made clear this case had gotten to her in a way that few others had. She told him directly that in all her years on that bench, she had never presided over a case as cruel, as calculated, and as vicious as the one he had carried out on the night of March 18th. She sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms in prison, plus 90 additional years. Ronnie O'Neal the Third will never be a free man again. Before they took him out of that courtroom, he said, and I need you to hear these words carefully, I am not sorry for something I did not do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
That was what he chose to leave behind. No remorse, no grief, no acknowledgement of the daughter he killed, the partner he hunted, or the son he tried to erase. Just defiance. This case gets talked about because of the violence, because of the courtroom chaos, because of a man who turned a murder trial into something that barely resembled one. Those are the things that go viral. Those are the things that get clicks. But that is not why we are here. I want you to leave this video with 3 names. Kenyatta Baron. She was 33 years old. She was a mother who, even while bleeding from a shotgun wound, was thinking about her children and not herself. That 911 call she made, the one the prosecutor played for the jury as the final thing they heard before deliberation, was not just a cry for help. It was an act of love. It was a woman trying to get police to that house while she still could, because her children were still in it. She gave everything she had, every last second, fighting in the direction of the people she was responsible for. We say her name. We remember her. Ronnie, 9 years old. She could not speak for herself. She could not defend herself. She could not run. But the forensic evidence that investigators gathered from that bedroom spoke for her in court. Loudly, clearly, and without any possibility of being explained away. Her story is one of the hardest in this entire case to sit with, because she was so completely vulnerable and so completely let down by the one person who was supposed to make sure nothing ever happened to her. Her story is a reminder, a hard, painful reminder, that the most vulnerable people among us need the most protection, and that when that protection fails, justice has to show up and say her name out loud. We say her name. We remember her. And then there is the miracle. Ronnie the Fourth. The boy who walked out of the fire. He was stabbed. He was burned. He was left inside a house that his father had lit on purpose while he was still inside it. He was 8 years old. He walked out of that fire on his own 2 feet and told the first officer who reached him exactly what had happened. He spent 3 years carrying the truth of that night. And then he put on a small suit, walked into a courtroom, sat 5 feet from his father, and did not look away. Not once. Not even when his father tried to use warmth and familiarity to shake him loose from what he knew. That is not just survival. That is something that I genuinely do not have the right words for. Because whatever word you use for the kind of strength it takes to do what that boy did, it has to be bigger than any I know. Detective Mike Blair was the first officer on that street who reached Ronnie the Fourth the night of March 18th. He found a boy standing outside a burning house in the middle of the night. 8 years old, stabbed, burned, holding his stomach with both hands, telling a stranger in a police uniform that his daddy had killed his mommy. When the case was closed, when the verdict was read and the sentencing was done and the cameras all went home, Detective Blair did not move on. He and his wife adopted Ronnie the Fourth. They gave him a new name, a new home, a family that would not leave. They showed him in the most concrete and lasting way possible that the world contains both the kind of person who will set a house on fire with children in it, and the kind of person who will run into that fire to bring them out. They showed him he was worth running into the fire for. The house on Baroness Avenue is gone now. Knocked down. The lot sits empty. You would drive past it and have no idea what happened there. But the truth of what happened on that street on the night of March 18th, 2018 does not disappear just because the structure does. We tell these stories here at Cases Decoded because Kenyatta Baron deserves more than a file number in a police database. Because Ronnie deserves more than a statistic in a report about child fatalities. Because the boy who walked out of the fire deserves for the entire world to know what he survived and what he became on the other side of it. This case asks us to pay attention to the warning signs, to take patterns of control and escalation seriously before they reach their worst possible outcome, to believe people when they tell us something is wrong, to not wait until it is too late. But this case also gives us something to hold on to. It gives us proof, real, documented in the court record, that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the 11-year-old boy in the small suit who sat 5 feet from his father and did not look away. If the story moved you, if it stayed with you, please share this video. That is the single most powerful thing you can do right now to keep Kenyatta's name and Ronnie's name in the conversation. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. We are here every week going all the way in on cases that deserve more than a surface level take. No shortcuts, just the full truth, told with the respect these stories deserve. Hit that like button. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is over there right now. I want to know. This is Cases Decoded. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there.